What am I to do?
Welcome to RazorBranding Podcast with Jackie Russo. To learn more about how to improve your brand, visit brandrusso.com.
Hi, it's Jackie Russo. Thanks so much for joining me here at RazorBranding Podcast. I am honored, delighted, intrigued, and slightly shocked that we have managed to get Ekaterina with the Future London Academy to join us today, because she is, first of all, global and international. And usually most of our guests are from the Ekaterina area. And second of all, you're just going to be excited to listen to her accent for an hour. But third of all, the fascinating knowledge that she has to share with us today. So, Ekaterina, welcome to the show.
Hello. Thank you, Jackie. Thanks for such a lovely introduction.
It might be the shortest and weirdest one you've ever had, but I'll take it. So just, I think, before we even kind of go into all of the lives you've led and the work you've done, I guess in this day and age, really we start with, how are you feeling? How's the family? Everybody healthy and well? Everything good on your side of the world?
Yeah, I think we've been very lucky, and definitely the spirits are up. As you know, London is opening up again next week, so we're all in quite a happy mood, and today's a sunny day with clear blue sky. So I think, yeah, it's a good day.
It sounds like a good day. So now, did London have that same kind of big second wave that the rest of the world is going through right now?
I'm not a medical advisor. I cannot tell any statistics, but we were on a lockdown and we will be soon out. That's all I know.
So when we're talking about lockdown, are we talking about like major lockdown, nobody leaves the house, nobody goes anywhere, like lockdown?
I think there are kind of, you can't lock people up for the second time. So I think this time it has been much more flexible. And I don't know if you are following British news, but I have to say it's always very confusing. And if you talk to two different people, they'll tell you two different rules to follow. So yeah, we've been okay.
So mostly it's just everybody has to leave the pub by 9.
Seriously, I didn't even properly read anything that our government was announcing because it's so confusing.
Well, I think that just summed up all governments everywhere, no matter where in the world you live, because they all seem to be confusing at times, for sure. So catch us up a little bit on your background. I know you've had an interesting and diverse path. So tell us where you came from to get to where you are now.
Oof, yeah, it has been quite a ride. And as you probably guessed from my name, I was born in Russia and I moved to London about 13 years ago. So I trained as a graphic designer. I also studied digital design, or rather it was called multimedia design when I studied it. And I worked in all sorts of things, digital branding, advertising, and worked for some of the most fantastic agencies. I was lucky enough to work with Michael Wolff, the founder of Wolff, probably one of the most well-known branding agencies in the world. I also worked with Donatella Versace, again, my personal hero. So I've had a brilliant career in design and branding. And after a while, I realized that there is this big gap currently around education for senior professionals. So as a creative director myself, as you reach a certain point in your career and you're quite good at what you do, but at the same time, you have another probably 50 years of your career ahead of you, and you don't really know where to learn new things when you kind of know the basics and all the other stuff quite well. And essentially what I started doing is, first of all, I was sharing my own learning, and I taught at lots of universities and conferences and kind of all the places that I could share my knowledge. But also I was learning from lots of other people that was around. And luckily in London, we have some of the most brilliant agencies. So all the people that I hang out with are agency owners or creative directors, and just loved hearing that perspective on work, on managing teams, on design, on the future. And eventually I started introducing more and more people to kind of things and that they share. And with my friend and ex-colleague at that time, eventually we started Future London Academy as a place and a space where people can learn from incredible people who work in design, innovation, and technology, and essentially people who already achieved a lot but want to be even better at what they do.
That's a fascinating journey to get all the way around to where you are now. So when you think about the things that you've picked up along the path, if you were to sum it all down to the top maybe 3 things that you feel like most people don't know about how to build a brand and why that's so important, what would they be? What do you feel like they really need to come to the Future of London Academy to learn that they probably don't know now?
3. I think summarizing many years into 3 things probably is a tough challenge, but I will
You
try.
can do 30. You can do 30 if you need to, but 3 would be good.
I had the time to think about it actually, because I recently wrote an article for Forbes around kind of building stronger brands, and I tried my best to summarize it into certain things. And I suppose a couple of things to know about branding right now. So first one, that branding is the new advertising. So if you remember the kind of Mad Men time, the 60s, when those creative agencies were the kings of the world, where if you have a brilliant advertising campaign, then your brand will perform well, then you'll sell lots of your product, your company is growing. That was the time. As long as you can find the right slogan, as long as you can find the right visual for your advertising campaign and a big TV budget, then you're sorted. Currently, advertising kind of went all sorts of ways, from obviously digital to social media to TV, and kind of switched to partially Cannes Lions artistic direction to a bit more of a technical game and analytics and numbers game, essentially, with digital. So it became less of a space for brands and companies to express themselves and actually get the attention of the audience. So now branding is becoming the new advertising, when if you have a strong brand, if you build a strong brand, you actually can achieve a lot with your company. And companies that don't pay much attention to what their brands are, unfortunately, won't be winning, even if they have amazing product, even if they have massive advertising budgets. If they're not spending time on thinking what their brand is, unfortunately, that won't work out. And on the opposite side, we've seen companies like Glossier that, without much advertising budget, without much media attention, managed to build very, very strong brands purely on how they showcase themselves and what they represent and who they represent. So branding is important. That's first very, very clear point that I suppose a lot of us need to understand, that this is the world where we need to focus on brands. In terms of how can we build stronger brands, I think that's obviously a complicated question. Obviously, one is the purpose of the brand, which I suppose is a bit overused at the moment. Everyone talks about the why. Everyone loves Simon Sinek's the starts with why book, and it is important. It is important to understand why does your company exist, and therefore your brand should represent that purpose and that mission that you have, and that drove you to create the company, if you are the founder, or if you work for a company, then finding and digging up that mission. Why do we all do what we do? But not forgetting the how of this, because again, why is not something you can build overnight. And especially if you already work in an established company, suddenly coming back to the office tomorrow and saying, hey guys, you know what? This is the new mission, this is the new purpose. It's not something that you can just transform and get thousands of people to believe in one day. Luckily, the how part is something that you can get results much faster. And that's where I suppose branding experts and graphic design and design experts, like the traditional design people, come in. And there are a lot of tools right now that are not they're not well used yet. Therefore, it's a great opportunity for brands to use them. So, for example, motion graphics is becoming a new important part of building a brand. Again, our brands now, they live in digital. They work through user interfaces. They are no longer this business card and logo and everything else. Again, we've been stuck in our houses for a very long time. We only interacted with brands in a digital environment. So how they're represented in the digital world is incredibly important. But it's not always just about kind of following the brand guidelines and building a decent website or app or wherever your brand lives. But small things like motion graphics actually is now creating such a massive difference. And big brands like Facebook are already really using it. I don't know if your listeners know the company called Buck. They are incredible motion design company based in the US, and they create those very, very detailed guidelines for companies like Facebook and Microsoft and Google, and another one is Tendril Studio, that again really works with how does your brand behave in a digital world. And that digital behavior can be the small interactions. How does your navigation menu open? Does it like jump out? Does it appear? Does it slowly slide out? So all these tiny things, they build your perception of what brand is. Is it natural? Is it exciting? Is it fun? How does it feel? How do I interact? Same as you would interact with a person. So this small interaction. So motion graphics and kind of putting a lot of attention into how does your brand behave online? I think that's another great one. Another underused tool is typography and custom fonts. There are, I'm sure, even people who are not familiar with design and now started paying attention to fonts after all this big news about Burberry changing their font from like very intricate serif to a quite modern and I suppose more neutral font that is very common for current fashion brands. And there was debate whether they lost their identity because they became so bland, or whether that is a modern brand and that's what it means to modernize a brand, make it relevant, make it modern, make it look like everything else you see around you. So there is a lot of power in custom fonts and custom typography where your brand can really stand out. So instead of just picking one of the fonts that already exist, actually investing in a fantastic type design studio. Again, in London, we are very lucky to have studios like Dalton Mag, like Contrast Foundry. Like there are many in the UK and across the world. They're just really good at what they do and can create fonts that will have that, again, same character, same intricate details that represent your brand well. Even if your customers don't know anything about the fonts, they will look at something and immediately will feel something different from, I don't know, looking at a standard document or a Comic Sans ad. So a lot of power of fonts. And I suppose the last thing that I would mention as something that is not used enough currently and has a massive power is sound branding. So again, that's an area that traditionally didn't have much attention because we mostly look at visual things. It's much easier to work with visual things, and sounds as something feels a bit artsy and vague. But because we now live again in a digital environment, it's especially with the younger generation, you probably notice they constantly have their AirPods in their ears. So they watch their Instagram and stories with sound on, which for me was slightly freakish thing. I always felt like I do need to be prepared when the sound is coming out, and I really need my space to listen to something. Younger audience is actually quite used to sounds and voice messages and Alexas of this world. So sound is becoming a massive part of your identity. So again, lots of big brands capitalized on that, like Visa. They created their sound identity. Where actually they collaborated with Mike Shinoda to create their sound, which is again incredible. There are companies like Anna Bank that created a sound that basically whenever you tap your card, so that's a fintech company. So whenever you tap your card to pay, it does the meow cat sound, because their whole brand identity is about cats, and it's hilarious. And it again attracted a lot of media attention. It was something that their community discussed a lot, and especially because they created for more like a quirky freelance creative people, I think that was a great marketing campaign on its own for them. So I suppose this will be my top tips, apart from all the basics that need to be in place.
I think those are brilliant. That is a genius list. And I appreciate you taking all of the different options and boiling it down to those as kind of the core. So thank you. one of the things that is fascinating to me, and I hope that you can speak to this as you roll through and talk about some really big companies that have done some really big things. I think oftentimes small and medium-sized companies feel like they can't do that. That's something that big companies spend big money to do. But aren't there things that smaller to medium-sized companies can do? And even probably more so because they're a little more nimble?
Oh, absolutely. And such a great question, because I agree there is a certain perception of what the big brands should do or shouldn't do, and the same for the small startup brands. And I have to say, actually, one trend that is very, very exciting and interesting, that big brands now are trying to behave like small brands. And if you've seen Nike campaigns, Nike, like you say in America. So Nike actually says, or tries to collaborate with local creatives in every single market that they go to. They actually collaborate with a lot of individual freelancers, artists, because they realize the power of having these connections with the smaller communities and staying small and feeling small and local. So small brands should definitely capitalize on that, being local, collaborating with whoever is representative of your community. That would be your superpower. So if you know, if your audience are creative people and you want to attract more of them, then collaborate with an artist that is not the big influencer that everyone follows, but someone who is well known and well respected in this small creative community. Collaborate with them on creating your brand identity or your, campaign or illustrations, whatever you want. Because again, if you have great relationships with those small connectors, then you can build a really, really good campaign. And I think one thing that I probably should have started with in terms of building a brand, that brand is like a person. So whenever you think about building a brand, and I'm sure lots of the people on your podcast mentioned that, it is all about how would this person behave? If your brand was a human being, how would it interact? What kind of language would they use? What would they dress up as? Would they, if you call them, would they pick up immediately, or would they make you wait? If you go online, what kind of things they do? Are they partying and kind of having fun, or they're quite serious and professional and maybe a bit stiff? Again, all of these things you can think about as a person. And the same way, going back to your question, being small or being big, if you think of, creating your own image as a person, it doesn't matter if you have lots of money and you're buying Chanel and Gucci and trying to create a certain look or a certain atmosphere around you. You can do exactly the same effect with whatever budget you have. So it's just being very clear about what does your brand represent, who is it as a person. Imagine that person if you can, and then start from there, and you'll find the right elements.
I think those are great points. You talked a little bit about Burberry and their change of their typeface. I think there's often this conflict with people about wanting to do whatever is the industry norm, and at the same time knowing that they have to stand out and differentiate to be different. How do you strike that balance?
Ooh, that's a tough one. And I agree with you. It is so difficult, and it's so easy also to fall into the usual trap of fitting in. I suppose it depends on what you're trying to do. If you're a law firm and you need to look established and look like you've existed 100 years, then of course you should try to fit in and try to have a name that looks like all the other names and have a very kind of clean and simple identity that, again, looks like all the other identities. But if you are trying to show that you're different, you're fun, you're small, and you're for all those quirky people out there that maybe don't fit in, that have a different mindset, then you should look like that. Again, going back to the metaphor of a person, who do you want to hang out with, and what kind of person do you need to be to hang out with them? Whether you will dress like everyone, or will you try to stand out? And again, every brand has its own audience. You can never ever target everyone and anything. Again, even Facebook struggles with that because their audience is very broad, but they still try to find identity in that. But for every other brand, it's very, very clear about who you're trying to attract and who is your ideal customer, who are the people that you really enjoy working with, and then thinking, what would they expect from your brand? Do they expect it to be different, to be very colorful and bright and fun and do different things and not follow the trends? Or do they expect you to be quite traditional and actually be modern but not too much? Would they be embarrassed if you go too crazy and they were like, oh, I don't want to be part of this company? Or they would be actually shouting about you like, look, these guys are not like everyone else. I'm so amazed and so surprised that they did it, like big high five to them. So it's also understanding who you're working with and what works for them.
Right. No, that's a great point. I find that oftentimes people, especially in the States, and I'm not sure if this happens in London, they seem to be a little confused between the differences of a brand identity and all of those elements that go into the brand identity and the brand standards and guidelines, and building a brand under the definition of being more like a reputation and how everything kind of fits underneath that umbrella. How do you explain those differences to people and help sort of train them in thinking of it in the bigger picture?
Oof, that's actually a very interesting point, because there is a lot of confusion around language, branding. It is a very vague and gray territory, and there are lots of people who actually argue about what does constitute branding. Does it mean building the actual influencing the product as well as how it looks, or does it mean only creating a reputation for this product or how it looks, but not touching what it is? In my opinion, we should think about both, and especially as far as I understand, your listeners are the business owners, so they're in a very lucky position to actually influence both. And I think that's a great position to be in, when you can think of who you are as a company, internally and externally, as well as how you look as a company, and how do you sound, how do you feel, how do you smell, all of these things. So if you can do both, do both. And that means sometimes not doing certain things, and sometimes cutting certain products because they don't fit to what you stand for as a brand. So starting with that, okay, why does my company exist? What value does it bring? And how can I bring more value to people? And then, okay, if I want to bring that value, how do I need to look? How do I need to sound? How do I need to represent myself to actually get across to the people that I want to get across to? But yeah, if you can do both, definitely do both.
That's awesome. And wise advice. When you think about all of the branding projects that you've worked on in your career, what are the ones, and I'm not going to make you just pick one, it's plural, you can do more than one, but which ones are you most proud of? Do you feel like you took something that was here and brought it all the way up to here?
Okay, I will give you an easy answer, and it's Future London Academy, because it was a very interesting experience for me, because I was on both sides. I was on a client side, same time as I was on a creative side. And I think that gave me a lot of reflection on what is the role of creative people and agencies. So when we started Future London Academy, as any startup, we kind of didn't think much about every single detail of how it should look, feel, smell, because again, when you start a business, you just want to start something that works before you jump into all the tiny detail. But when we grew to a really good size, we realized, okay, now is the time to rethink what do we stand for and kind of how we should represent that. And that was the point when the big word rebranding happened to us. And we're like, okay, how do we approach it? Do we do it in-house with our creative team? Do we get an agency in? Do I influence it because my whole career was spent in creative world, or do I kind of try not to get involved and just watch it happening? And it was a bit of everything. So we actually worked with a couple of creative agencies, and they developed our kind of core idea and brand identity. At the same time, I was still part of that creative team, so I was guiding them, trying not to get too personal about it. And I realized that I can be a terrible client myself, and obviously that was an interesting reflection. And also obviously involving our internal team, because I think especially when you have to live with a brand, you can't just have it completely externally given to you on a plate and then kind of passed on to the team. Everyone needs to be involved. So it was all of these things. And it was actually an interesting process for me the questions that I had to ask myself of what's right, what's wrong, and how we can work with it after it's done. Because, for example, some of the initial ideas that the agency had were relying heavily on 3D and motion graphics, which looked incredible, but unfortunately we don't have in-house motion designer. So I realized to support that as a smaller team, we will constantly struggle. So there were lots of things that we had to say no to, just knowing our internal operations and kind of understanding what would be a feasible option for us. So that's one thing. But also now that I see it living and breathing and developing, because it developed a lot since its inception and kind of the original rebrand, because we have incredible creative team and they are constantly experimenting with it. They're constantly trying new things, and it's really good to see it growing, because the worst thing that can happen to a brand is when it's passed over and then it gets staler and staler every year, just because it's basically at that point when it has been developed, and obviously it starts becoming and looking quite old very, very fast. So yeah, I was lucky that we had the internal team that could support and grow it from where it was and adapt to new trends, new things. And now we actually do a lot of motion graphics, because again, our team capabilities are a bit wider. So we actually went back to lots of the original ideas that we thought were really good. So yeah, it's kind of a bit of both. And I think on that note, I also remembered a quote, or rather an advice from the creative director of Diageo. So he's one of our experts on the branding masterclasses that we run. And Diageo is, I'm sure all of you know, own all of the brands like Bacardi and all the vodka brands, all the alcohol you probably have in your house. He talked about how they work with creative agencies and how they pick creative agency. And he said that the biggest mistake creative agencies actually do is they think they are the superstars. They think that they're the ones coming up with creative ideas and the client is just there to pay the bills, and no client would want to feel like that. You as a client, obviously, you are the one finding the budget for this branding project or marketing campaign. So of course you feel like you have the creative power and you are the one who is part of the process. So when the creative agency, after launching the big rebrand, kind of writes an article or goes to Cannes Lions or wherever they go and keep talking about how amazing they were and this kind of superhero effort that they put in, and client was difficult, but we still made it happen. And obviously no one will work with agency like that afterwards. So it was quite interesting to hear his opinion, and kind of remembering my own experience of being on both sides and reflecting on that. I definitely felt like the best thing you can do for your brand, whether you're an agency or whether you're on the client side, is find that collaborative power where you don't argue, but you kind of find the right answer together that is good for the company and is the right creative direction.
You're right. It's got to be about the collaboration. If you could have done that with an American accent, you would have sounded just like two agencies that I worked with before co-founding this one. And they both used to say all the time that the client gets in the way of success, and everything would be great if it wasn't for the client. And all I can think is, who's paying the bill? Isn't the client the whole reason we exist? We don't have jobs without clients. So I never really understood that negative approach to clients, where I feel like the challenges they present sometimes cause us to work a little harder and produce something even better.
Oh, totally. It's at the end of the day, it's all about relationships and people. Again, we can go back to that. The brand is a person, clients are people, we're all a human beings. So I think the more we can understand that, the more successful our companies, our brands, and our collaborations will be.
Absolutely. Talking about Diageo, I was at the Ad Age Small Business Conference. Gosh, I guess it was last summer, but it feels like a decade ago. And I had the chance to have lunch with the representative from Diageo that was there, and we were talking about their roster of agencies, right? I mean, they work with dozens, and how challenging it is to manage all of those different agency cultures and agency personalities. And she had some fun stories to tell. So I can only imagine, now that you've been working with their creative director, that he's had some fun stories to tell as well.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, if anyone wants to hear the full story, I'm sure everyone can go to our website and find out. We have the branding masterclasses there. But I think that was the most insightful talk for me from the creative side, and actually getting into clients' head and understanding what do clients actually think when they work with creative agencies. And you're right, it's a lot of managing all sorts of creative people, and it's not easy.
It's not easy at all. So talk to me a little bit about Future London Academy. I know that you've talked about how the brand identity and the brand personality came to be, but talk about the business model itself. What was it born out of, and what's the purpose, and what are y'all hoping to accomplish?
Sure. So as I mentioned, when we started, we didn't know what exactly it will be. It was just my personal pain and frustration that literally there is no place to learn. If you're already good at what you do, you're a senior, you have a successful career, you have at least 10, 15 years of experience, there is no place you can go and learn. And we wanted to create that place specifically for people working in design, innovation, or technology. So the creative minds, and especially the industries that are changing the fastest, I think. We can see how nowadays we need to be up to date every single year with everything that changed. So we started with doing 1-week programs here in London where people come from all around the world. We accept 30 people, and during that week, we visit all the coolest agencies here. We go to their offices, we learn from their teams, from their creative directors, from their founders, how they work, how they approach projects, and all the cool things that you can learn from those people. And it's incredible. I mean, first of all, being in London, I'm biased. I love London. I think it's the best place on planet Earth. But I have to say, for creativity, it's definitely the one to be, because it has creativity everywhere on the streets. We have amazing street art scene. The agencies here, probably some of the best branding agencies, are concentrated in London. So it is fantastic just to be there and experience that. So it was a 1-week experiences, and we ran them. One was on branding, one on UX design, and one on innovation. Same principles, you visit and meet the best people in the industry. But also we show the cultural side of London. There are parties and drinks as part of it, or we have a final kind of networking event. But also spending the week with like-minded people. As you can imagine, creative directors from all around the world actually have very similar challenges. And I think it comes as a surprise to a lot of people that someone from Chile has exactly the same client pains or running an agency pain as someone in Australia or in Russia or in Canada or in the US. And it's fantastic actually to bring these people together and just see the energy that happens in the room and discussions that people have. And we have people forming all sorts of friendships and partnerships after that. They go and travel to each other's countries afterwards. It is fantastic. It's brilliant. And kind of our mission with all of this is to connect creative communities around the world, give them knowledge and inspiration so they can make the world better. So we kind of deliver on that mission through now a variety of things that we do. We now run custom learning experiences for clients. So they are now online and offline. So again, the same principle of learning from the best in the industry. And now we have lots of online courses, again, catered to senior professionals. We have courses on innovation, on trends, on futures, on UX design, on branding. So it is all about learning from the best of the best and kind of getting very practical. It's not those theoretical things of what's supposed to happen, what's written in a book. It's people who actually do it right now, who are good at it, and them sharing their processes, their thinking, their challenges, and how they go about it. So it is quite intense, quite fun, and quite practical.
I think it's fabulous. I find that here in the States, two of our biggest challenges are that the 4-year university system hasn't really embraced the branding philosophies, and they're not producing students, or graduates, I should say, who are really trained in that curriculum. So I think that's a little bit of a challenge. And then secondly, there seems to be this perception that I find often that once you've graduated, you're done. and you don't need to continue to grow and evolve and adapt and learn. And yet our industry changes so rapidly. And so it's fantastic to see what the Future London Academy is doing in terms of helping develop those lifelong learners and giving people a chance to continue to build their careers.
Oh, absolutely. And you definitely nailed it here about the educational system, because that has been my biggest frustration. And actually, before starting Future Learn Academy, I thought, you know what, I'll just go and change it. And actually, I tried teaching at universities, and unfortunately, the whole system is quite broken. For example, you need a teaching degree to teach. And I had a full-time job as a creative director. I couldn't suddenly quit everything and get a teaching degree so I could pass on what I already know right now. So the whole system, and you're right, we have very, very well-planned learning experience until the age of 22, 23, our school, college, universities, and then until the age of 100, we have absolutely zero plan or structure or path that we can take.
No, you're absolutely right. I tell people all the time, because I go and do these guest lectures at universities. And when I'm teaching, I'm always saying, listen, when someone goes pro in a sport, they become an NFL football player or an MLB baseball player. And I'm not talking about the soccer that y'all call football, American football. They continue to train and practice and learn and work out and improve their craft, or they're not going to make it very far in their professional career. And yet when we graduate into a desk job, it seems like we're done. And I think, no, your training should just be starting, because what you learned in school from a textbook is so far from the real world practical application. It's night and day, right?
Oh, absolutely. And definitely the industry is changing. So no matter how amazing we were 5 years ago, if we don't keep learning, that will fade away very quickly. And I think actually the biggest mistake I've seen creative directors and senior people make is thinking that I made it. And I think that's the worst thing that you can do to yourself, because as soon as you there, that means actually you're going down. And the only people who constantly feel like, I also need to learn this, I want to try this, I won't stop here, these are the people who keep their careers growing and flourishing. And again, talking about Michael Wolff, who is actually now 87, I think, years old, incredible human being, very wise man, incredible creative and branding professional, but also definitely a person who constantly learns. He's so up to date with all the technology. He's always on social media. He's always sharing something. He's constantly learning new technologies, and he's so curious about everything. And I suppose that's why we like hanging out with each other, because I learn from him, and I hope he learned something from me, but he definitely asks me a lot of questions. So I think that's fantastic when you can surround yourself with curious people who constantly question the world around them and want to learn from other people. I think that's the only mindset that can take you into your 100 years of being wise and creative and curious.
Absolutely. I'm always worried for the people that I hear say, oh, I'm not techie, I can't do that. And I'm thinking, well, learn it. That's, if you had said that when social media came online 10 or 15 years ago, where would you be today? We have to adapt and evolve and grow and change, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I don't know if you've read Carol Dweck's book, Mindset. That definitely changed my life. And it's all about, do you have it on the shelf as well?
It's on my shelf. I'm looking for which shelf it's on, because it's right here somewhere.
Oh, brilliant. But it's
find it.
About this growth mindset and constantly not thinking that you're right, like I'm not good at tech or I'm not good at maths or whatever that is. It's not thinking that it's fixed. If you actually try and practice it, you actually will get better. It will be painful, it will be uncomfortable, but you will 100% get better. I definitely had that problem with, like, I thought I'm not good at finance and kind of all these things that I never actually properly learned anyway as a creative person. Turns out if you try and try again and learn, you actually get better at it. So whatever that is that you think you're not good at, just practice, just try, and trust me, you'll get better.
I think that is a universal thing. No matter if you're in Lafayette, Louisiana or London, England, we all have to continue to learn and evolve for sure, which is why I think we have to be readers, right? And podcast listeners, and have conversations, because that's how we learn, is from other people, not just from textbooks. Absolutely. So when you think about what the long list of offerings that the Future London Academy provides, where would you tell someone to start? What do you think they should dig into first to really get them going in the right direction?
If we're talking about branding here, I would say check out our branding masterclasses. So it's 7 masterclasses. They're just under an hour long, and they cover everything from sound to typography to client relationships. So it's essentially all the best people in the industry sharing what they're currently doing. So I would definitely recommend everyone to start there. And it is all for professional people, but it doesn't matter if you don't work in branding, you're more on the client side, you'll find it very helpful as well to understand what elements of the brand you can improve. So that's quite short and sweet and easy. We have longer programs, some announced, some will be announced very soon in January, that go much more in depth on the subject. And there is one coming out about brand strategy. So that's more for people who actually have to build brand strategy and work in that full time. So that one is coming out in January. We have one on transporting and foresight, for anyone working in innovation, or to be honest, now I think everyone needs to think about the future and kind of how we can apply that, whether it is to creating new products or whether it's to creating brands or whether it is to actually your company's strategy and operations. So that's a fascinating topic about kind of using the future and understanding how we can adapt. And yeah, we have lots of other programs depending on where you are in your career. I suppose the one that personally is my favorite is the Bauhaus program, or it was inspired by Bauhaus. It's a design leadership program. It's starting in July next year. And it's a year program for essentially like an MBA for creative people. We're only accepting 20 people, and it's a rigorous kind of interview process. And we're essentially accepting the best from the best to be in this group of leaders who will be learning from CEOs and CFOs from top companies like Monzo, like TransferWise, like Wolff Olins, like Virgin, and all the wonderful companies out there. So definitely if you are at a senior position and working whether in design, marketing, or creative or technology, check that out. It is a big commitment, though it's split into very, very small modules. There are 5 modules that you need to attend. They're only 2 weeks, so it's actually workable around a full-time job. But it's for someone who actually wants to take their career to the next level and is ready to dive into learning the business side of creativity.
That is awesome. I was in a similar program at the beginning of this year through Goldman Sachs. It's the 10,000 Small Business Program, and a similar idea, monthly modules and going through and learning. That had the advantage of being in person until we were about halfway through, and then March happened, and so we all got sent home. But I love when you can immerse into that environment, and I find that not only in those kinds of situations do we learn from the instructors and from the material, but we learn from our peers. And so I love that you're keeping it a small group like that. That's very smart.
Oh, absolutely. And seriously, looking at the profiles of people, this will be the group that just rules the world. We have applications from all around the world, from Japan. We get over 6,000 applications now. It's anywhere from Japan to Australia to Canada, from Apple, from Netflix, from Google, from small companies, small startups in Brazil, or Belizean agencies. So it's like literally every single place on the planet, and all sorts of people and types of people. So it will be an incredible experience. So yeah, I'm quite looking forward to that.
That is awesome. When I saw the list of guest speakers and teachers that y'all have, the names are just a laundry list of who's who. How do you convince these amazingly talented people, who I'm sure have incredibly busy lives, to come and do classes for you?
Yeah, I think that's the biggest mystery about us, isn't it? I suppose it's a kind of 2 parts. One is my personal connections. I, again, worked in this industry for quite a while, and I'm a friendly person. I like hanging out with people like you. So it's always fun to meet new people. And throughout my career, I just worked with some of the brilliant minds, and we stayed in touch and still friends. So that helps. And then the second part, during these 7 years that we've been running Future London Academy, we actually built an amazing brand, talking about the importance of brand. We have a lot of people approaching us to be part of what we do. And I suppose that's when I don't know, the first couple of years you build a brand and then the brand works for you. So now we actually have a lot of interest and people are proud to collaborate with us. Our reputation in the industry is brilliant, and people enjoy working with us. Everyone who ever taught in our programs, they always share their learnings and kind of how amazing it was. So yeah, it's just great reputation and being a nice person. That's what it is.
I think being a nice person gets you pretty far in life, and it's underrated as the importance of it. People don't realize how important it is just to be nice to people. I mean, really. So what's a typical day in your life like, not counting our current situation with regards to COVID, but in normal times, what's a typical day life for you? I just envision you jet setting around the world and doing fabulous things.
That used to be the case. I have to say I do travel a lot, and I think it went to a certain crazy point, I think last year, but I'm trying to definitely cut down on travel this year. In general, yes, I would. I love traveling, and I always use work as an opportunity to go to places I've never been, whether it is to speak at a conference, whether it is to organize an event to meet up, or whether it is to meet clients. So I definitely enjoy that part. When I'm not traveling, I have to say my whole life is on emails, and I'm sometimes afraid that I'll become a boring person because all I do is reply to emails. I obviously have catch-ups with the team and kind of run some sort of creative meetings and all sorts of other things. But mainly I am the communicator, so I have to decide kind of the overall vision and the strategy, as well as make sure that everything is going according to the plan. I have a fantastic co-founder who is more on the business side of things, so he looks after sales and kind of numbers and everything else. And we obviously have an incredible team who supports every single part of it. But yeah, mainly my life is on emails and any sort of public engagements. I'm definitely the face of the company because my co-founder said, you know what, I'm not going to do that. That's your thing. You go and do it. So yeah, whenever there is something that would be me.
Right. Our lives sound very similar. I just don't have as good an accent. So otherwise it's emails and doing catch-ups. I totally get it. So Michael has posted a question. He wonders what you think of the role of the creative professional and marketing professional now that user-generated content and crowdsourcing and the ease of entry level and access to more professional-like tools has grown. How do they live together in this ever-changing world? Is there still a place for the well-trained professional when everybody with an iPhone can produce film quality content?
Yeah, of course. I think, and it's a great point about user-generated content. There is definitely a big place for this now. But I have to say that, again, it's all about the knowledge and the experience and how you apply this. So content has always been only one part of any equation. The strategy and the vision behind it, that's a completely different game. So as of whether you are founder of the company and that's your role to decide how you represent your brand or what kind of things are relevant for you, whether it is the channels that you go into, are you on TikTok or you're not on TikTok, or whether you decide what kind of message in general feel that you have. But of course, you need to collaborate with your customers, with your users, and encourage them to be part of your brand. But your role is to filter and navigate that world, because if you just let it go as it goes, that will become a mess and the message will become very inconsistent. I think my biggest insight was around language. We have very particular language at Future London Academy around the things that we do. So we don't have lectures, for example, we have masterclasses, because our things are not about someone talking at you. It's more about the practical side. It's about like the frameworks people use. It's about exchanging the experience. So we call them masterclasses. And it was very interesting to see how by us using this language, everyone around us, all our customers and clients, pick up the language and started using the same terminology in the same way they describe it. So even though it is the user-generated content now of everyone posting feedback and their learnings and how they enjoy the experiences, they use the language that we use. And I think that's important to keep the brand consistent, and how you describe things, the certain things that you bring attention to. You as a company leader, marketing director or creative director, you are the one who need to understand what would be the values that you focus on, and then everyone else can pick up from that.
Brilliant. I am shocked to tell you that we've been together for 50 minutes and we're about to wrap up. We've gone through this lovely stack of cards.
Whoa!
Oh, I know. You're impressive. We're down to the very last one, which is our lightning round. So, what is your favorite place on earth?
London.
Okay.
I would be more specific, Clerkenwell in London. It's a specific area everyone should visit.
Okay. And, had we not been captive this year, I probably would have made that trip. So I think it'll be next year, and I will be calling you so that you could show me exactly where that place is. Movie you can't turn off.
I would pick the one that I watched many times. It's called It's About Time. It's actually a British movie, and it's a rom-com, so don't expect anything too sophisticated. But it talks so well about time and how we devalue time. And I think even though it is a very sweet movie, it actually had a very big meaning for me. So if you haven't seen it, definitely check it out.
I'm putting it on the list right now. What is your favorite TV show to binge watch?
No, that would be embarrassing. Sex and the City for me. I think it has incredible fashion. I don't care what people think. It's awesome.
It's awesome. Who says it's not? I will fight them. It is awesome. What's your favorite book?
I change my mind all the time because I discover a new book that I fall in love with. My current favorite that I would recommend everyone is called Peak, P-E-A-K. And it's all about how we learn, how we improve, whether it is our sports performance, actually based on peak performance in terms of sports, but actually it's applicable to anything you do. So I would definitely recommend that book. I got really inspired by it.
Okay, I love that. Favorite podcast to listen to?
Couple. So there is How I Build This, which I love so much. I think Guy Raz, who is the journalist doing this podcast, is probably the best journalist I've ever heard. And every time I listen to his podcast, I'm like, how does he do this? This is incredible. And the new one that I discovered that I would definitely recommend is called Happiness Lab. It's from Yale University professor, and it talks about psychology of happiness, not in a boring way, but in a fun and practical way. And it's actually a spin-off from a course that was at Yale University and was the most oversubscribed course ever, I think, in the history of university or something like that. So it has been incredibly popular, and they decided to make a podcast out of it. So definitely recommend it, especially nowadays.
Absolutely. Favorite car?
Can I skip that one? I don't drive. I don't know anything about the cars. I would say, I don't know, a good one with fresh air. I don't know.
Totally fine. What is your pettiest pet peeve? The thing that people do that just annoys you, but you're annoyed by it.
That's a tricky one.
Okay. For some people, it's like the sounds people make when they chew or when they don't paint their fingernails, or it's just those little bitty things that you're just unnerved by. People who cut in line.
Someone being rude, I think, that really trips me. Like someone getting rude for no reason. I think, yeah, don't like that.
That's a good one. That is a good one. Favorite musician?
You have really good questions.
Thanks.
Musician. Mike Shinoda, because we mentioned him, actually, sure. I was listening to Fort Minor recently, which was his side project apart from Linkin Park. And I just thought he's such a creative genius, just in everything that he does. So I'll pick Mike Shinoda.
That's a great choice. That is a great choice. I don't know if you karaoke, but if you did, what song would you sing when you're up on stage?
I definitely don't karaoke. I have absolutely zero voice. Considering my mom is a musician, I'm very embarrassed. So, I don't know, something from U2?
Okay, that's fine. What is your favorite sport to watch?
I am all about doing and not much about watching. So I
Okay.
will play any sport you give me. I used to play
Really?
basketball. I would play any sport I've never played before just to try it. I can't watch any sport, even basketball, which I like. I can't
Right.
watch it. Don't find it interesting at all.
I love that. I played basketball in high school. So when we do meet up in London, I might have to challenge you to a little game of horse.
I love it. Let's do it.
Okay, awesome. What is your favorite meal?
Favorite meal. Okay, can I be odd here?
Yes.
Because I love going to great restaurants for the atmosphere. So in that sense, I don't really even care much what I'll eat, as long as it's healthy. I like healthy food.
Sure.
But what I found recently incredibly comforting is we have, because everything has been in a lockdown, so we didn't have any restaurants open. And I found a couple of foods essentially in our supermarket. They're incredibly good. And I think that gives me certain comfort and sense of control in life when I can eat the same thing every day.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds odd, but every day I'm really excited about eating the same things. So there's like some vegetables and some apples and other things. And I literally have the same pack. And I love doing that. So that's odd, but I love it.
I'll take it. I think that's a great answer. What is your favorite leisure activity?
Sports. I'm obsessed with anything sports. Dancing probably would be my choice of, actually, we did a dance class today. I hired lots of instructors to do all sorts of exercise for our team during the time the gyms are closed. And essentially we do sports every day. Whenever I have time, I do sports.
I think that's awesome. What's your favorite way to treat yourself?
Party with friends. I love going out with friends, connecting with friends, going for walks, anything to do with friends.
All right, that's a good one. Last but not least, to wrap up our entire hour together, what's the thing you think you've learned the most through this pandemic process? What is something that you feel like you've gained during this year?
It's a tricky question because I will realize it only a year after. I think right now we all think we had some epiphanies about life, and actually half a year later we'll be like, that's not relevant anymore. I suppose the one thing that I just realized about my human body, that I need to do sports every single day to stay sane. And I'm glad I realized it, because now that we're in second lockdown, I put it as practice rather than relying on whatever happens in life, and that improved my well-being incredibly. So definitely understanding what makes your body happy was a good learning for me.
All right, good. The very last question I always end with, what would you wish I had asked you, and what would the answer have been? There's got to be something you wanted to talk about that I missed.
You didn't miss anything. I loved our conversation. So definitely nothing that I missed. But I suppose the thing I could talk forever about is fashion.
Okay.
So if we had a conversation about dressing up, fashion, anything like that, we could have another hour.
You know, it's funny. Anybody who's watching this that knows me personally would realize I am not the one to lead you in that conversation. I am a t-shirt and jeans kind of a girl. So I would love to listen to it. That would be fascinating. My 16-year-old would probably get all into that with you. Those are not my skill set topics, though.
But that's what I love about it. It's about personal choice. It's not about what everyone thinks. So we could talk about comfortable clothing for like literally an hour, like what do each of us find comfortable? So I think it's a fascinating topic.
Okay, good. Well, then when we do the next time, we will spend our hour talking about comfortable clothing. I'm all about comfort.
Great.
I cannot thank you enough. This was delightful and fascinating, and you are genius and brilliant. I loved your insights. The information that you shared, thank you, thank you, thank you. And to everyone watching, thank you for spending this hour with us. I hope that you learned as much as I did, and please make sure you go check out Future London Academy, because I think that you will see we all need to be lifelong learners. So thank you to everyone, and I'll see you again next week.
Thanks, Jack, and thanks for having me, and thanks everyone for listening.